This conference is being recorded.
Welcome to the overview of Terragen 3 Professional Session 2, presented by Ocean Green. This session is copyright 2013 by 3D Art Live and PlanetSide Software. So welcome back to Ocean, and I'll just go back to his screen share so everyone can see Ocean's screen again. If you just a few of you confirm that. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Danny.
Great. Okay.
Okay. Take it away, Ocean. Thank you.
All right. This begins the second session. We're going to take a close look at some of the new Terragen 3 features. These are just some of the major ones. There's a number of features we won't have time to demo today, but if you go to wrong window. If you go to our website and go to the Terragen 3 product page, you'll see an overview of all of the other new stuff. So just real quickly, things we won't be covering: the Linux render node is one example. FBX support. There's a number of other things that we've added that are really great to have. But we'll be looking at a subset of features today, but hopefully a good focused look at some of the more interesting things. So Terragen 3 or Terragen 2 has had Global Illumination from the beginning. It was always turned on by default. Again, just striving for that realism. We really wanted to have the best possible lighting solution in the from the get-go in the default scene. You can use fill lights and turn off Global Illumination if you want to, or change things however you like. But we really continue to strive to make realistic rendering as fast and easy as possible. So the Global Illumination engine that Terragen has obviously has to deal with tremendous scales. You can, as I said, literally zoom out to looking at the planet as I'm doing here. And it has to be able to deal with that. So it's been tuned. Here you see the planet with atmosphere and everything. It's been tuned for these very large scales. And inevitably in doing that, you necessarily have ideal settings for smaller areas and whatnot. So one of the options we had in Terragen 2 was called Global Illumination Surface Details, and it was intended to add additional detail to surfaces, to the the terrain and whatnot. It doesn't affect the atmosphere or the clouds. But it does affect objects and the terrain and displacement and whatnot. That option was, it was effective in Terragen 2, but it was very slow. It increased render time quite a lot. So it was a very intensive, kind of a more brute force approach. We took a look at that setting, that option in Terragen 2, and literally completely redefined it for Terragen 3. Just completely replaced the functionality and the way that it worked. It has a similar goal, and what features it accentuates in the terrain are end up being similar because it's based on the actual illumination of the terrain, but the actual rendering speed is much faster, and the amount of control you have over it is also much greater. So I'm going to go. I've got a kind of just a simple test scene here, and I'm going to go and do a little crop region here to make rendering quick. But basically it adds detail to areas of the surfaces. So it's going to add it's similar to like occlusion culling, or ambient occlusion. So it's going to look at areas that shouldn't be receiving light, but it also handles light bounce and stuff like that. And it's a very fast setting. As I said, I'll show you the difference of render time with it on and off. So the option is down here at the bottom, GI Surface Details. As with the regular Global Illumination, there are two options. There's ambient occlusion and Global Illumination. I always use Global Illumination because it's more accurate, and the time difference is minimal, so you might as well. But you could use ambient occlusion for special effects or particular effects you might want to achieve. The default, you've got your occlusion weight and your bounce to the ounce, a somewhat humorously named setting that's just a light bounce essentially. And these are so these are two sides of the same coin. You've got occlusion weight, which is how the light, the areas of the scene that would be less visible to light, how much they're weighted, so that's shadow areas. And then you've got bounce of the ounce, which is your light bounce, how much the light bounce is weighted. And then the radius in pixels. So this is going to depend on render resolution, but it basically controls the radius that is evaluated for the GI calculation. And then you've got fall off as an option to turn on and off. All right, so I'm going to do a quick render here. And just to show you the difference with it on and off. All right, so hopefully you can see that. That is a low detail quick render, 7 seconds. All right, we can make that a better looking render because we've got render time to spare. It looks like 7 seconds is pretty fast. So let's see here. So I'm going to turn it off in a moment. We'll get the render time here with it on, and 17 seconds. Okay, I'm going to turn it off, and then I will open up the actual output image in an image viewer so that we can compare the difference directly between the two. But 17 seconds is our previous render time, so we'll see what it looks like without that feature turned on. And I'm probably going to turn up the settings a little bit so you can see the effect a little bit more. Okay, so 15 seconds. So it added 2 seconds to the render time in this case, which is very, very small. And on larger, longer renders, it's going to add proportionally less time as well. All right, I'm going to use the feature of Terragen 3's automatic render output files. It outputs files into a folder, and I'm just going to look at the last two images that I did. So you can see this is without Global Illumination surface details, and this is with it. So you'll see that there's these areas in this image, which is without GISD, that they're unnaturally light. And here they've been occluded properly. The lighting has been taken into account more accurately, and these pitted areas are, in particular, are more shadowed. So that's definitely an important difference in realism there. So let me turn it up a little bit just to kind of show you what these settings do. I'm going to increase the occlusion weight to 5. One thing also just to mention for those new to Terragen, one of the great things to my mind about Terragen is you've got these sliders that give you a general recommended range for a particular setting, but you can always enter your own values into pretty much any setting, and in general, it won't cause any problems to do that. So even though the top of the slider here is 1, I put in 5. So this is the result with 5, and hopefully you can see it's quite a lot darker than the previous version. In fact, I'll open up the temporary files again and just take a look at that. So this is the occlusion weight of 1, and this is occlusion weight of 5. So quite a bit of difference there. And then I'll show you what the bounce to the ounce looks like. I'm not sure we'll get a lot of difference in this particular scene. It tends to affect more when you see, this is going to be an outlandish effect, but I'll just show you real quickly what it does. But there's a couple of scenes we had in a demo. Let's see if I have that in here. Yeah, so one of our users, Martin, one of our more talented and prolific users, did this comparison scene with Global Illumination surface details on and off. On the left, it's off, and on the right, it's on. And it's a bit subtle in this case, but I think realistic. You get just more detail in the shadowed areas in particular. But when you up the exposure on this guy, or excuse me, increase the light intensity, there's actually some really nice light bouncing that happens right along this terminator line and stuff like that. So just to mention, that's the effect of bounce to the ounce. You can see here, especially down here, it's been accentuated, certainly unrealistically so. So this is the previous, 1 second. So that's, there we go. Okay, so this is bounce of the ounce of 1, and this is 5. So you can see essentially it's just weighted these light areas as bouncing more light proportionally around the scene. So it's probably unrealistic, but can be used to achieve some cool effects. And that's a sort of a foundational principle of Terragen as well, is just being able to push things to wherever you want them to go, even if they're not necessarily realistic. We do have some fundamental limitations in certain areas, but for the most part, you can do almost anything you want to, even if the realism says that it's probably unlikely. So that's Global Illumination Surface Details, the new version in Terragen 3. As I said, there was an old version in Terragen 2, same named feature, but different settings. The new version is much faster and more effective, and I'll just show you a couple of additional examples of it here. So this is this is the old Global Illumination from Terragen 2, and this is the new version. I don't know how well it's going to come through in Fuse meeting here. The compression might ruin it, but it's really bringing out a lot of detail in the shadows, especially. And like the shadows around the bushes here, you'll notice this is the old GI, new GI, and the new GISD really adds some depth and weight to the shadows in these bushes here. There's another example. Let's see. Sorry. Here we go. So this is Terragen 2 Global Illumination, and this is Terragen 3 GISD. So again, you notice just lots more subtlety in the shadows on the road, in the grasses here. Here in Terragen 2, the lighting is fairly uniform in the grasses, even though GI is turned on. And with Terragen 3 GISD, it's much more subtle and varied. And in particular, too, you notice here in the shadow of the bridge here, where the stairs are, this is fairly flat in Terragen 2. If you switch over to the Terragen 3 render, there's a lot of depth and detail that's just added in there. So GISD is a great new feature and comes at such a low render cost. We just have it enabled by default now, whereas we never have been able to do that in the previous version. So that's GISD.
Yeah, that difference, just to let you know, Ocean, that difference does come through through Fuse meeting. Yeah, a lot of people can see that.
Excellent. All right.
Yeah. Now, is there any questions on this particular topic? We've got a few off-topic questions as well, but particular questions on Global Illumination. Okay, ready to move on, everyone?
Yeah.
I think if we've got time for the off-topic stuff, then we'll save those towards the end. Hold on. We got a question from Jake.
Okay.
He says, "Is GISD default settings, are they okay for most scenes?"
I would say so. Yes. That was our intention with setting them that way. They might be considered conservative, but I would say they're probably fairly realistic, just with the default settings of 1 and 1 for the bounce and occlusion, and then the blur setting. One of the nice things about it, as I said, is that it's so fast to render. You can experiment with it. I would set up a simple scene like the one I have here with this just funny displaced sphere and a couple of sample objects, and you can render tests in a matter of seconds, play around with the settings and see what it does. I think that's one of the most fun ways to learn about a setting, and the kind of the limits and boundaries and whatnot. We do have the max value of that slider set at 1. Probably we might adjust that in the future so that it goes up to 2 or 3. But as I said, you can put in whatever number for the setting that you want in there, and play with extreme values and have fun with it. So.
Yeah, Danny, Gordon, and Tony also mentioned that. Yeah, to crank up those values.
Just to have some fun.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next topic.
Okay. Great. So I was just kind of jumping ahead here and experimenting.
Hey, one moment. What's the email address you want me to send it to?
support@planetside.co.uk.
Okay, it's coming. All right.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
So I'm just experimenting with some blur here. Oh, I've got the crop enabled, that's why. Turn that off. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is the depth of field feature. It's new in Terragen 3. Not only did we add depth of field, but we also added a feature that allows you to either use real depth of field. I've got it turned off, no wonder. I've got the depth of field disabled, so now it's turned on. As I was saying, we now have depth of field, and there's an option to either do it with brute force sampling, which is how a lot of renderers do it, and it's the most accurate way to get true 3D motion blur, 3D depth of field, so to speak. But it's very time intensive, and so you can use the 3D depth of field with noise reduction option that we have in Terragen 3 and get very high quality results in a much faster time. So I've got that option enabled right now. Detail is incredibly low on this this render, so it's actually, you can see some artifacts and whatnot. But we're getting a pretty quick render with depth of field enabled, and we're going to have probably a minute of render time here for this little guy. And full depth of field enabled. You can see that the closer grass elements are in focus, and the other elements further away are out of focus. So yeah, it looks like 1 minute and 2 seconds. So obviously there's some quality issues and whatnot. The sampling of depth of field is going to be controlled by the anti-aliasing, but I can just increase this a bit and get a higher quality result. So I mentioned a little bit in the previous demo what depth of field is, but I'll go back to, actually I can probably bring up an example here just to really show people what we're talking about here. So depth of field is a camera term, and it's referring to the focal plane, so to speak, the area of focus in an image, the depth of your focal field, so to speak. So how deep the area that will be in focus is in an image. So here you've got your foreground object out of focus, and then you have a background object in focus, and then you'll see again it goes out of focus beyond that. So it literally is sort of a slice of the scene depending on your focal point and what your camera settings are. So the settings that we have will be most familiar to people who are familiar with traditional cameras. So you control the depth of field on the blur tab of your render camera. Now you can have multiple cameras, so remember to be editing the right camera when you do this. And here you'll see under the depth of field heading here, you've got a focus distance. So that's the center of your that's the focal point essentially in camera terminology. And then the aperture diameter controls the amount of blur essentially. And the readout at the below is the aperture diameter is measured in millimeters. Most people probably won't be familiar with that, but if you look below, there is a conversion to f-stop with equivalent focal length down below. And for people who are familiar with cameras, that's going to be an easier way to look at it. Anyway, what I've done is made a very shallow depth of field by using an extremely wide open aperture here, an f1.2, and you can use whatever values you want again, so you can make extremely unrealistic stuff if you but I've just used this just for effect purposes. And as I was showing in the previous demo, here's your depth of field preview, this button here. So you'll see it overlays this orange area onto the scene, and as I'm adjusting the focus distance, you'll see that change. So I had the focus distance here showing this grass in focus, but the background, anything beyond that's shaded in orange here, is going to be less in focus depending on the settings that I have here. So I've increased the number of samples. Anti-aliasing, the last render took about a minute. Let's see what this does. The main thing I wanted to show is the depth of field preview, and then also just that the 3D depth of field with noise reduction cuts down your render time quite a bit in making still high quality results. So I'm going to let this guy render for a moment and then show you the same result without. Well, you can see it going through, and basically what it's doing is taking a sparse set of samples, and then it's doing calculations on them to create a higher quality result that's still fairly accurate. Now, it's most accurate to render with brute force and just use lots of samples with depth of field, but there are relatively few cases where you're actually going to have a problem with that, where the loss of absolute scene at 3D accuracy with the noise reduced version is going to be a problem. So we use the 3D depth of field with noise reduction by default. You can again switch to just straight 3D depth of field, and basically you're just going to have to use a higher anti-aliasing setting to get an equivalent level of quality with that. Again, as I said, it is somewhat more accurate, but hopefully I can do a demo here, and you'll see that the difference in accuracy is not something you would notice on an average render. There are, if you look into depth of field rendering papers and stuff like that, you'll see information about where this, where sparse sampling approaches potentially fail, but for the most part, it's a very good way to go in terms of render time trade-off and whatnot. So it's a cool thing to have in Terragen 3. It makes working with depth of field much faster. And you'll see here I've doubled my anti-aliasing, which is probably overkill, but definitely we've got now very smooth results on the depth of field, and it's a little over doubled the render time. But if you were to try to get similarly smooth depth of field through pure brute force sampling by not using noise reduction, it would be you'd probably have to use 10, 12 anti-aliasing and increase render time quite a lot to get a quality result. So almost done with our render here. I don't think I'm gonna have time to do the non-noise reduced result. Maybe I'll do a crop just so you can get an idea of it. Let's do that real quickly. And I'll move on while I'm doing that. Okay. Next topic, render layers and elements. I inserted this in at request, and I don't have time to do excuse me, let me do a crop. I don't have time to do an actual render with the render elements, but I have some examples of the render elements that I can show you. And also we can look at the UI while this is rendering. So this is a good time to talk about Terragen allows you to mess around with the settings while you're rendering. Sometimes that's fine, sometimes it's not advisable. So here's a crop rendering without noise reduction. You'll see the results are quite a bit noisier, and simply enabling noise reduction doesn't really affect the render time, but gives you a much higher quality result in the same amount of render time. Whereas to fix this problem normally, you would have to increase the number of samples by increasing the anti-aliasing significantly. So the 3D depth of field noise reduced option gives you a high quality result in a short time. Okay, so render layers. If you go to your renderer, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, any questions on that?
Yeah, Ocean, I've got a related question to do with render times, because Wallace was asking, could we ask what CPU that you're using to render so that we can understand render times? So I think he's trying to get a sort of sense of how powerful your machine is in order to understand, sort of make a like-for-like comparison in the times, I suppose,
Sure.
with his.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a Core i7 34. So it's a 3.8 gigahertz, 4-core, 8-thread CPU. Excuse me. I believe. Let's see. Let me check. Actually, yeah, I've got a slight overclock on it right now. I think it's at 4.2 gigahertz. But it's a fairly mainstream processor at this point, aside from the overclocking. And actually, Intel CPUs do some default. They've got the turbo mode and stuff like that does some default overclocking by itself in ways. So, anyways, yeah, it's an i7 at 3.8 gigahertz by stock. I think it's at 4.2 right now, and I've got 16 gigs of RAM and an NVIDIA 560 graphics card, I think. So it's bought it a couple of years ago now. It's maybe 2 years old. It's not a super high-end modern machine. It's a nice machine, but not top of the line anymore. So
Yeah, Christmas is around the corner.
Yeah, I'm hoping for a machine like Michelle has there. That sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, Wallace actually says that he's got the same. I think he's got the same processor as you, so that's good.
Okay, yeah.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so moving on to render layers and elements. So if you're in your renderer, you go to Layers tab, and here you can specify a render layer. So I'm going to create a new render layer, and then go to the settings of that render layer, again using that handy little button. So what it allows you to do is to group things. You can use the normal grouping system of Terragen 3. I've just created a new group here in the node network. I'm going to drag some objects into that group, and then I can specify a group, and it's group 01 I just created. You can assign groups and light groups to a render layer so that you can split the scene up into different layers. Basically, you don't have to do this. If you just want to render it all out into one layer, that's fine too. But this gives you even more fine-grained control. Now, this is separate from the elements that you output. The render elements are things like the depth pass, the alpha channel, etc. Those are the actual elements of the render. But the layers are scene layers, so allowing you to split your scene up into different groups and sections so that you can adjust them independently more easily. Okay, so these are global settings for your layers output, and they're hopefully fairly self-explanatory. If you're doing advanced compositing and whatnot, you probably know what these options allow you to do. You can also override the global illumination settings here if you want to, just to quickly get access to that. All right, here's the main meat of the whole thing. This is all of the render elements that you can currently output, and they're split up into 3 different sections. You've got your standard render elements and extra output images. So that's your RGB, separated for cloud, atmosphere, and surfaces if you want to, or the main RGB element. You've got an alpha, and then you've got separate surface, cloud, and atmosphere alpha. So those are the basic ones. Then you've got lighting, and again, you can separate out the lighting for pretty much all the elements, in particular the cloud and atmosphere and the surfaces separately, so it allows you to adjust all that stuff independently. There's separate element output for diffuse and specular, and for both GI and non-GI contributions. And then there's finally the data section, and data is things like your motion vectors, your depth pass, G buffer, or I forget the other name for it, but anyway, you've got surface position, surface normals, and cloud position. And one interesting thing I note is, there was a tutorial online for Terragen 3. I think it got taken down recently, but it was using the render elements to do some kind of relighting techniques in Nuke and various other things. So you can do all of that kind of stuff using this combination of passes. You can assemble the scene exactly as it would render, but with a lot more control. And with the surface position output, you can do some relighting stuff. With the depth pass, you can do depth of field. With the motion vector pass, you can do post 2D motion blur, which is sometimes a much faster way to do it. It's a bit less accurate in a similar way to the post effect on depth of field, but it's oftentimes a good way to go, especially if you have a good third-party tool for doing your work on that in. Anyway, so that's the render layers. Don't have time to do too much, but I'll show you just real quickly what the output of that stuff looks like. So I did a composite image for the Terragen 3 release that just kind of stuck together a whole bunch of different elements. This is the alpha. I believe this is surface normals. There's a direct lighting pass here. There's a surface diffuse pass here. I think this is depth pass right here. And I'll just go through some of these so you can see it. So this is a depth pass, for example. You see closer objects here are lighter, and then in the background it gets darker. It just gives you your depth. This is the diffuse, direct lighting, etc. So all those are output as EXR format, so they're high dynamic range. Every one of the elements, they give you full ability to do compositing with high accuracy. All right, I'm going to move on. Any questions real quick about render layers and elements?
Any questions, anyone? Yeah, we've got a few off-topic questions, more general questions, but I'll save those to the end.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Next thing I was going to show, well, you know what? I'm going to move library up the list because I'm going to use the library in the population demos to come after that. So let's take a look at the library. I showed it briefly in the previous presentation, and now we'll delve into it a little more in depth. I think the library is awesome. It's a great new feature added newly in Terragen 3. So here I am in the library. I've got a bunch of stuff in here. Terragen 3, as I mentioned previously, does ship with some default content. So you're going to have pretty much most of this stuff available to you. There's some cloud types. There's some surface shaders, wet stone shader and clay and tundra and various other kind of defaults. And we're working on increasing the number of presets with each new release. So we're going to continue to do point releases, 3.1, 3.5, and those will be free updates for registered users. We'll also update the free version of Terragen 3 at the same time, and the presets are not available for the free version, but just to note that those will be simultaneous updates, which is different than Terragen 2. But in any case, as a licensed user, you get access to an ongoing increasing library of presets and also objects. We have about 20 objects here that come as a separate download for free with Terragen 3 purchasers, and we'll be increasing that library as well in the future, working with XFrog and other partners. So the library is basically a place to both for default preset content and also to organize your own content. It is probably a familiar feature for Vue users and for many other probably applications. It's set up in a standard kind of grid style here. There are different view modes to view your items in the library. I personally prefer icon and name, but there's just straight icon, detailed, view, name. You can just view it as a list, which is handy. And then you can change how it's sorted, the direction of sort. You can specify favorites, and then those show up here in a special favorites section. And you can open items to you can choose a file using just straight open dialog, and then you can add files. This is probably one of the most important things. You can scan a folder or add individual files to your library. So you can scan an entire folder and subfolders if you want to for new content. I'm not going to do a scan right now, but essentially it'll go through your whatever folder you specify and add items that it recognizes, add file types it recognizes. So it'll do TGO, OBJ, it'll do clip files, TGC files, TGD files, which are Terragen scene files, and you can also optionally load images, so you can load in textures if you want to and whatnot. Once you have it all loaded in, you can go and organize all of your content. So when you click on an object, you get a little preview of it here. You can double click to open a larger preview. You can zoom in to get a larger view of that preview. So the previews are you either have to generate them manually or they're generated for certain things when you do load the scene. For like clip files and scene files, you would need to specify a image file to act as the preview for it. So you can do that by clicking here on this little button to the right of the preview and choosing a preview image file. There are some other places as well in the user interface where you can do that. So if I have the render view up, this little guy here, you can click this to make it the render preview for the current project. So if you have a TGD in there, you can make it the preview image for that. There's also this info pane here, which is optional. You can turn it on and off with this button. I pretty much leave it on all the time because I've got lots of screen space. The info pane gives you information about your current object. Most of it's filled out by you. It gives you the date and other information. but it allows you to add a description if you want to. You can rate the item if you like on a 1 to 5 scale, and you can change the category that it's in. Now these categories by default correspond to the default groups in Terragen scene. So you've got atmosphere, camera, lighting, objects, renderers, shaders, terrain, and water. And it will try to associate or insert an object into that group if it's in that category, I believe. You can add tags, so you can search on a tag later, and then you can just add a simple comment. So some basic tools in the library at the moment, but definitely allow you to do some nice organization already, and we're working on increasing the tools available to you. And down at the bottom you've got a search, which I don't know that I saved my. Oh, it didn't show up. Anyway, sorry. This list up here shows you different ways to filter your list of items. So all library items recently added. You've got a couple of filters for date, and then the type of item. So clip files are TGC files, and clip files are miniature sections of a scene. They're just a group of nodes that you can turn into a clip file. And as I said, we've shipped some presets with Terragen 3. They're often in the form of clip files, and those allow you to, rather than replacing your entire scene, just insert a little bit into a part of the scene. I'll show you that in a moment. You can load height fields in here, images, objects, and projects, and provide previews for each one of them if you want to. And then there's the category sort as well here. So that's the basic overview. There's search options down here at the bottom, so you can search by name or tags, and obviously it wasn't doing it right before. Let me try lighting. Okay, so there we've got a tag I can search on. There we go. Okay, so the tags are working just fine. Is there a question?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions about libraries. I think okay, Alan Mordew's questions has already been answered. There was also a previous question to do with layers by Wallace from the last topic, and he said, can we use all settings for layers and then pick them out when taking them to nuke? I'm not sure what he means by that last expression.
All settings for layers. I'm not sure what the question is there. It's been
Wallace,
designed with a.
Do you want to go on microphone for that question, Wallace? He's saying, hold on.
Okay.
Oh, he hasn't set up the mic. Could you clarify your question, Wallace? You were talking about... your question was, can we use all settings for layers and then pick them out when taking them to nuke?
Pick them out.
Oh, okay. He says in Vue 2014 they used nuke. Not sure what that refers to.
Yeah, nuke is a compositor. So our layers elements output has been designed with nuke partly in mind. It does not. I did look at the Vue 2014 demo. Think if there's a notable differences. It provides similar capability. I think they're one of the things that they do is layered output in an EXR. We don't do that. It's all separate EXRs that we output to. But you can, as you saw, output a large number of elements, which I think is fairly comparable to Vue. They showed the world position element, which is similar to our position element, and I think you can do similar things with it in terms of relighting and whatnot. I'm not very familiar with nuke and compositing in general, so it might be a better question for someone more experienced with that stuff. But to the best of my understanding, it's fairly Matt worked with nuke quite extensively, and it's one of his inspirations for some of the Terragen functionality in UI. So I know he tends to favor it in terms of what will work well with how we set things up. So I would think that it should work fairly well.
Okay. Wallace had another question as well. He said, are the library items customizable as per se if made with the plant factory producer?
Well, if you were able to output, oh, I see what you're saying. No, so these are all, we don't have a procedural plant editor at this point. All of these items that it comes with are static objects, so they're TGO or OBJ objects. All of the ones that are preset content are TGO objects, which is a Terragen proprietary object format. You can't edit them in that same way. There are some things you can do in Terragen to provide variation in basic ways. You can do color variation and some warping with a new feature in Terragen 3, but in terms of unique instances like Vue does, no, we don't have a feature for that at the moment. We're definitely looking at some options for that stuff for the future, but we don't have an option for that at the moment. But you can edit anything that's in here aside from object files. So the TGC files, clip files, and stuff like that, you would you load a clip file in. I'm going to insert it into my scene here. You'll see it comes in. There's all the nodes that it came in with, this big highlighted group. And then if I were to edit this and then save it as a TGC again, or save it back to the library, it would, you would have a new version of that there in the library. So you can edit that content. Anything aside from an object, essentially, you can edit in there.
Okay, Wallace says thank you for giving great info. Thank you for your questions, Wallace.
All right.
Okay, I think we're okay to carry on.
Great. Yeah, I'm just going to wrap up the library preview real quickly with inserting some stuff into the scene. So I did just insert a clip file, as you might have seen. I'm going to get rid of that for the moment here. Go back to our default here. So back to the library. So we want to insert something into the scene. I'm going to start with changing the atmosphere. I'm going to add a cloud layer because it'll be a quick thing to check out. So let's add these alto cumulus. So I'm just going to double click on it. That's all I do. Pops up a dialog. You can insert, you can add, you can cancel. So add is just going to add it as nodes floating in the node network. They're not going to be connected to anything. Insert is usually what you want to do, and it's the default option. And what it does is it attempts to insert it into the scene in a place where it will work, where it makes sense. And it's based, in general, when you save a clip, you're able to specify the connections, input and output, that it will attempt to reconnect. And I'll show you that in a moment. So there it is. You can see all of the highlighted nodes are the ones that just added. So it added an alto cumulus layer cloud node here. And then these are all of the nodes that are driving the shape of that. So let's see here. There you go. You can see it has added the cloud layer into the scene. Updating our preview here. And it's as simple as that. If the clip file was set up correctly by the person who saved it, that's kind of what you rely on. But if that's the case, then it's pretty easy to insert it into the scene. So I'll give you another example here. I'm going to save a clip file this time. Oops. So I'm going to save these two nodes, the simple shape shader and the fractal terrain, which are, as I mentioned in the previous demo, are creating this mountain shape and then the flat area in front of the camera. So I'm going to right click on these guys, save nodes as clip file. And when you do that, you get a dialog come up here. And what it does is it allows you to specify the category that it goes in. And again, the categories generally are going to be associated with these default groups here. And it's going to try to insert it in there if you reinsert this clip. So it's detected that it was in the terrain group already. So it's added its set category to terrain already. You can add a description. You can add tags. So this is stuff that shows up in the library. And then here you can specify the connections. So you'll see that the top, both of these nodes here don't have any input connections. So the input is set to no input. However, if it was another node like the base colors node, it would have detected that the compute terrain was input for it and that the planet was the output for it, and it would have filled those out automatically. So it shows no input here. You can specify an input if you want to. And what this does, again, is it records the inputs and outputs and attempts to reattach them when it reloads the clip file. So in a default or Terragen scene or one that was built in the way that the default is built, it will generally be able to insert the clip file at the correct place. In a more complex or unusual build, you can do anything with a node network very flexibly. It might have more problems with inserting into the network. So one thing you can do is you've got this connection tips area down here, and you can just explain how you might suggest that somebody use this clip file that you're creating. And then you just create the clip file, you save it somewhere. Just going to save it into the desktop. Oops. And there you go. So that's how the insert clip routine kind of does its magic. Is you have to do somebody has to have done it right on the save portion of it to get the association correct. So it's a little potentially complicated, but with the presets, we've certainly made sure that they're all coming in correctly like that. And all you have to watch out for is when you're using other people's clip files that they might have created. But in general, it's pretty straightforward to use. And once you get familiar with working with Terragen, you'll understand better how to add stuff as well. So here's another clip file. I'm just going to add a stone shader, and you'll see that adds this big group here. In this case, we've got a little bit of explanation in a note node, and there's just various stone shaders that are I'm going to turn off the atmosphere preview here. Oops. Why is it so dark? The sun has appeared to have gone away. Not sure what I've done wrong. Well, anyway, sorry about that. I'm going to start the scene over. But in any case, that is the overview of the library. I have some additional stuff in here from my work, testing other people's scenes and whatnot, so that might have been a buggy file that I loaded or something like that. That happens sometimes. But anyway, the library, we're continuing to work on improving it in various ways. We've improved the speed of it with the latest release, and we're now using more efficient image previews and stuff like that. So adding some search functionality and some other stuff to it, and we'll be improving it further in the future. Any questions on the library?
Yeah, I don't think so, but we did have some positive feedback about the library features there, so I think some of the attendees were quite impressed with what could be done. Great.
All right, so we're running a little over time. I'm going to jump through population instance editing and color variation real quick. So I'm going to use the library. I'm going to import a population of those trees. And here we have our population. We've got a default 1,000 by 1,000 meter area with an object spacing of 10 meters. I'm just going to populate that and switch over to textured view. So we can see, there we go. Okay, so what we want to show you here is the new population instance editing feature in Terragen 3. Is there a question? No? Okay.
You're fine.
So I showed this in a previous presentation, but at the top of the 3D preview is this little button here. It looks like a couple of cubes next to the painted shader button. You click that, you can start and stop instance editing for this this population. You can also do that here on the editing tab of this population. So start editing. So I just click start editing, and now when I mouse over an instance, I'm going to get orange box for highlighting that instance. I can click there, and then I can move the instance around. I can so I'm in move mode right now, but I can also go into rotate. I can rotate an individual instance on each of the axes. I can scale it if I want to individually. So you can do this with any instance. Click on any instance, select it, mess around with it, scale it, do whatever you like with it. Very cool new feature, because populating is great to fill in a lot of detail in your scene, but a lot of times you want some specific features, and you can do that with hero objects. Certainly, you can just load an individual object in, but if you want to take advantage of some of the features of populating, but also get a little more explicit control. This allows you to do that. You can also delete specific instances just by highlighting them and pressing delete. So let's say you're real happy with most of the stuff in your population, but you just want to get rid of a couple things. No problem, you just go highlight it and delete an object. Okay, let's say that you deleted things you didn't want to delete. You can highlight the, you can show deleted instances here, and you can restore them with this button here. This is in the editing tab of the population that we're editing. And you can also highlight the modified instances. Those will highlight in green. So the red is showing the deleted instances. You can turn those on and off. And the green is showing the modified instances, so you know which ones you changed. And again, you can just reset it right here. And that's about it. It's a very simple but very powerful and very cool feature. I'm just going to stop editing now. And again, if I want to start editing from the 3D preview, so if I'd added another population here, I'll just show you that real quick. Population. Now you'll see on this button here, what's nice about this button is it lists all the populations in the scene. So if you're not even sure which population, or excuse me, if you're you don't want to go navigate to find it in the list, then you can just do that here. So you've got the bush population. I just started editing that, or you can edit whatever population you want from the menu there. So that's pretty much the overview of that feature. Questions? I can briefly. We're running long already, and I've got a couple more things to get through. Cache is somewhat of an advanced feature. It basically allows you, to it's like the GI cache in a way. It allows you to save the the instances that you populated. So sometimes you'll have a very large population that takes a while to populate. We multi-threaded the populator in Terragen 3, so it's a lot faster, which is great. But even so, if you're doing 10 million instances or 100 million or whatever, which we can definitely handle. I had a scene with some 200 odd million instances at one point, but if you're working with numbers that large, it can take a long time to populate. And so you can use caching to avoid having to repopulate when you reload a scene. You can basically just specify a file output and populate, and then just save the cache, and it'll give you it'll allow you to reload the already populated instances if you close and reload the scene, basically. So that's the real quick overview of that guy. No problem.
I've got one question related to populations from David Raffray. Is it possible to get coordinates of a specific object in a population?
I don't think so at present. It's a good question, though. Yeah, I'm not aware of being able to do that. We do want to, at some point, provide like a point cloud import and export. So you're able to essentially import and export the population positions, and the adding caching was a step on the road to that. So we'll probably be adding that in the future version. And in that case, you'd be able to get the position information, certainly.
Okay, good question, David. Thanks. Let's carry on.
Okay, so we can use the same scene to play with the population color variation, which is another new Terragen 3 feature. So there is a color tab on populations now. Color, the British spelling. I'm obviously an American, so I have to make note of that. But what you want to do is tint the diffuse color for, in general. You can also tint the luminosity if you like. I don't use luminosity on most objects, but you'd want to tint the diffuse color, and in this case, I'm going to create a new shader. You can use pretty much any noise shader to drive the color variation. So it's basically just like applying a surface layer or something like that. I'm just going to do a power fractal and increase the scale a bit here. But you can drive the I didn't add any colors to it. The color variation by any shader. So one of the cool things is you can drive it by, say, an image map if you want to, or you could drive it by almost anything. So that's kind of a cool, fun thing to be able to do. So one thing is that because it's doing a tint on the diffuse color, it's always going to be darkening. So this diffuse color multiplier down here is used to offset that so that it's not too dark. I'm just going to increase it to 4 to kind of highlight the effect. You won't see it, unfortunately, show up in the 3D preview at present, but it will show up in a render, and you'll see what that looks like as soon as it comes in here. But basically, what it does is tints the diffuse color of the object, and so you can, if you use a shader that has a variety of color throughout it, it's going to give you color variety across your population instances. This is a very crude example, but you can see my red is showing up here. I tinted the trees red. So it allows you to create some very nice subtle variation. I'll show you a much nicer example of it while that's rendering. That was obviously someone took more care over than what I'm doing. Let's see, where is that? I don't think I copied it over here. So, oops, TV3. Okay. Site, where is that guy? So this is an image made by Sarah. Where is it? All right, I'm not able to find it apparently. Sorry about that. There is a rather nice image that shows the feature. It's on our website. I'll just use that. Let's see here. Where is? Oh, bollocks. It's under the population control tab, right? Here we go. Yes, okay. So this is an image by Sarov that uses a much more subtle version. So if you look here at these bushes kind of in the background here, they have this subtle color variation on them that's in a much more realistic fashion than my crude example. And this is just a great example of what that feature allows you to do. As I said before, you can't do color variation, or sorry, you can't do unique instances as you can in Vue for certain things, but you can do other variations that effectively create variety. The population has random rotation that you can apply and scale variations and stuff like that. So it's we're working towards better solutions all the time, but you can still provide a good amount of variety with the tools as they stand, and the color variation is just a nice new addition to that. It takes a little bit of getting used to get the color variations as subtle and realistic as you might want, but it's a nice, powerful tool to have. So, any questions on that one?
Okay, did that cover? Because at the same time that you were presenting that, Robert was asking the question about color variation. So does that cover what you wanted to see, Robert, on color variation in populations? Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, great. I did cover some of so I'm moving on to the next topic, presets and usage. I did cover some of that briefly in an earlier part of this demo, but I'll just get back to that. Didn't show surface stuff so much. We did ship some other some complete projects with the preset content. So this is a couple of them: example high complexity scene, example medium complexity scene. A gas giant complete scene. There's some cool stuff in there. Nebula scene, planet with asteroid rings. So I'll just load one of these up, and these are basically to show you the construction of a moderately complex scene here. So you've got a fair number of nodes with additional shaders and functionality going on here. There's some notes that help guide you around a little bit. And it's just to kind of show you what a completed scene looks like, and we included a couple of them to to help give you some example. We also included or added some clip files for surface mapping, which I was talking about previously. So getting a basic, like this is a clay shader here, gives you, obviously very crudely added here just to color the entirety of the terrain, but I could add slope constraints to it or whatever else I wanted to limit the area of effect. But you've got this preset content is new for Terragen 3. We didn't have any in Terragen 2, and I think it really helps get a head start on building scenes and getting to understand how Terragen does what it does and how best to take advantage of the functionality that it has, especially those example scenes and some of the more complex clip files. So one thing I want to show you while I'm looking at this is you'll notice this inserted this chert clay silt surface, and obviously it looks fairly complex. It's got lots of color variation and whatnot, but there's only this one node here. So what's been done here is actually to encapsulate. This is not a macro type functionality, but you can use internal networks of nodes to simplify the node network. So there's this plus icon on the node to the right here. I'm just going to double click that. It takes you inside, and you can see it's actually quite a lot more complicated on the inside. These are what would effectively be child layers of that node. If they were on the outside, if they were here, they would be connecting in to the child input, or connecting into another input. But they are internal to the node here just to keep the node network clean. And it has pluses and minuses. It kind of helps simplify things on the top level view, but it kind of hides things as well a little bit. So if you really want to find out how something works, and you import a clip file and you don't see any real meat to it, so to speak, any multiple nodes or anything, you might look and see if there's a little plus icon there. You can go inside the node network inside it to check out what's going on inside. So that pretty much covers presets and usage. I showed before you can just double click a clip file and it inserts itself and all that. It's fairly easy to use for the most part, and we welcome certainly any feedback on that as well. It's a new feature for Terragen 3, and we're working on making it more and more intuitive all the time. So any questions on that?
I think we're good to go. Nothing in the chat box has appeared, okay. So yeah.
Great. So I was talking earlier about the new DEM support, digital elevation map, in Terragen 3. So in Terragen 2 we did have DEM support, but we added some additional format support and some better georeferencing functionality and other stuff of that sort in Terragen 3. So working with DEMs is easier than it ever has been, and it supports more formats, which is really quite handy. So there are lots of sources of DEM data. Michelle was talking earlier about he's making his own DEM data, which is very cool at a very high level of detail, it sounds like. But anybody can go to the USGS Seamless National Viewer here, and the address is right here, viewer.nationalmap.gov/viewer. I'll paste that into the chat window so everyone can get at it. But this is a really good source of free data. So you can just search for a feature, one of my favorites, Mount St. Helens, and zooms right to it. There it is. And then I'm not going to actually go through the download because it'll slow down the meeting here. But there's this download button right here. There's various other buttons. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with this thing, but I just use it for downloads. There's a download button right here. You click it, and then I usually like to just draw on to specify what I want to download. So you click that, you draw, and it pops up. You want elevation data here. That's all you probably want. You might also get, ortho imagery or something like texture, photographs of the area if you want to overlay textures and stuff. But I usually just go with the elevation data so I can texture it in Terragen. Click next, and you get a set of data that's available for that area. There's a whole lot of different options that you'll kind of have to gain experience with, as you go. But usually I like to go with the 1/3 arc second data. This is equivalent to about, I believe it's 10 meters, 9-10 meter per pixel. So, it's not super high accuracy, but it's fairly good data, and will give you definitely the general shape of the the landscape that you're looking at. Some areas have this very high resolution 1/9 arc second data that's like 3-meter equivalent, and I used that on some of my St. Helens images. It's really beautiful and highly detailed, and Terragen handles it very well, but I'm not going to go with that today. So then you would click the data that you want, click next, and once it comes up on the left here in the cart, you just click it and initiate download, and then that's it, just downloads. I've already done a download of some DEM data here, and it comes in as a zip file. So you just extract the zip into a folder, which is what I did. And I'm going to come in here, make a new scene. I'm going to add terrain. Now I'm doing height field load DEM. So we have a specific DEM oriented height field loader. I'm going to go into my DEM folder. Into that folder I extracted data into. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of files in here. Which one do you load? Well, usually I go for whatever the largest file is. So I sort by size, and the IMG is what you want. Generally that works pretty well. I can't give more specific instructions because there's all kinds of different DEM formats, and we do support a wide variety, and some of them work differently. But generally I start with the largest file and see if that works. It works that way with GeoTIFFs, with IMG files, with lots of others. So I'm just going to double click to select that. It's going to load in my DEM data. Now, we do support georeferencing, but since I don't want to go find the terrain somewhere, I'm just going to turn that off real quickly just to show you that it worked. But we do support georeferencing, as I mentioned, so I'm disabling the fractal terrain shader so it doesn't interfere. But anyway, the data is loaded. I'm below the terrain, as you can see with the red indicator there, so I'm just going to move up. But there's your DEM data that I had previously downloaded. It's not the area I selected when I was demonstrating that data download feature, but it is a piece of DEM data from that same website. We support all 3 of the major formats that they offer data in. So I believe there's ArcGrid and IMG and one other format, don't remember the name of it, but anyway, we support all those formats and a number of other formats. We even support LiDAR data, which is lunar imager data. So you can load data from the moon, which is pretty cool. I think this is an area in Washington, but you can see, very real-world terrain features here. So I did load some DEM data previously. There it is. From the moon, so that's moon craters. Pretty cool. So DEM data, digital elevation maps, they're real-world data, and they're available for most of the globe from this seamless viewer that we were just looking at. Sorry, I'm clicking around so much. But it is a United States government site, but it actually has data for larger parts of the world in a different section. This is the US area, but there is a version of this that has data for the whole globe. So, and very high detailed data in the United States in particular. So it's just great to be able to pick whatever random feature you really like, Yosemite or Zion National Park or something, and be able to render it very quickly and easily in Terragen just by loading a DEM. Very cool stuff. So that covers the enhanced DEM support. Any questions on that?
Hey, just checking the chat box, nothing just yet.
All right.
I was going to ask personally if they had some maps of Mars on that
Not on that site. Not on that
okay.
site, but there are maps of Mars, and there's a couple of different ones. There's MOLA data, which we have a loader for actually. If you look here under displacement shader, the MOLA map. I was explaining earlier in the previous session how it loads tiles. Basically, you can load or you can download whatever section of Mars data you want, whether it be the whole planet or some portion of it at whatever detail you want, and then just load one of the files into the MOLA map shader, and it'll load all of the adjacent tiles. So we're gonna have functionality like that for DEMs as well in the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
No problem. All right, no questions?
Yeah, next topic.
Okay. Well, I did show the the 3D objects in the 3D preview already, so I guess that kind of takes care of that, I think. But I'll just go back and kind of redo that in case anyone missed some of that in the covered in the previous session. So I'm going to go and add some objects. And okay, so there are two aspects to this actually. We have this miniature preview here, which we've always had, but now it supports objects and it supports shaded and textured views, as you can see here over on the left. And it's the same navigation controls as the regular 3D preview. So you hold down Alt, left mouse button rotates, right mouse button pans, and then the middle mouse button zooms in and out. And you can just rotate around your objects. It's very handy to be able to kind of check out the object in a neutral space and kind of, you know, be able to find good angles on it or whatever it is that you like. So that's pretty cool. And then in the main 3D preview, we've only got a bounding box here, which was the default in Terragen 2. Terragen 2 also had wireframe available, but now we have two other modes available to us for object display in the 3D preview. You can do smooth shaded, which can be handy, especially for higher density you know, objects, and then textured mode as well. So in this case, textured is obviously what you want. Gives you much more realistic look at the object and what it's supposed to look like. Lets you position things much more readily. There's a lot of times objects use textures and alpha transparencies to generate a lot of the shape. So if you're not if you're not able to view the transparency, then you won't be able to accurately position it. That particularly is true of like grasses and stuff like that, where, you know, sometimes you'll have a grass patch that's largely constructed of flat polygons with grass textures on them, and it'll just look like a flat mess in smooth shaded view, just like this does with all these, you know, flat leaves. So it really takes on its proper character when you show it as textured. So, you know, not some revolutionary breakthrough, but it's definitely a handy new addition, and it works for populations. It works for pretty much any object. So I'll just import a population real quickly and do a population, and there they are. So yeah, those are also textured views. So that's that. Okay, last, well, I don't imagine anyone does, but does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah, I think we're good to go on that one. Thank you for that.
Great. Okay, last but not least, there is a cool new shader in Terragen 3, the Vortex Warp shader. And this is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a vortex. I've actually just added it to the terrain, which might surprise people, but Vortex Warp can be used pretty much all over the place. It creates a vortex just like that, and as you can see, even in the 3D preview, there it is. There's a vortex in my terrain. Obviously very useful for things though other than terrain, like water and clouds. You can do really cool things, really great special effects and neat you know, elements in your scene using the Vortex Warp shader. There's, you know, some settings to it over here. You can control the radius of it, so it comes at a default of 1,000. You can make it bigger, smaller, whatever. This is again measured in meters, just like everything in Terragen is, or most everything at least in Terragen is. So you can see I've just decreased the size of it a bit. It's a good deal smaller as the 3D preview refines. Go back up to 1,000 for a maximum effect. The vorticity is, you know, how vortexy it is. You know, how much it's spinning essentially. You'll see as I adjust it down. Hopefully you can see in the 3D preview what it's doing there. I'm going to actually turn off this simple shape shader and hopefully get more. Actually, let's see if that. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so basically it's just controlling the amount of influence. You can see now that I've turned this simple shape shader off how much of an effect that has on the terrain. And, you know, it's definitely doesn't look necessarily like something that's realistic, but just for novelty's sake, I'll bring this up because I love this feature so much. There's this place in Arizona called the Wave that I have not visited yet, but would very much like to. But you can see that features like that are not necessarily out of the question for the real world. This is a geological formation in Arizona. So there's some pretty fantastic stuff out there, and we like to provide tools to make everything from the mundane to the fantastic. And the Vortex Shader is a tremendous tool. I'm demoing it here on terrain just because it's quick and easy, but it does work on clouds and water as well. You can influence what axes it's influencing on here with X, Y, and Z radio buttons here, and then you can also reverse the direction. And that's pretty much it. You can change the center of it. It's a, change the position of it. It's a, move my camera out of the way here. But this is the handle for it here, the drag handle. So I'm literally just dragging my Vortex Shader around in the 3D preview, and you can see it influencing the terrain as I do so. So that's a pretty cool thing, just being able to interact with it in that way. That's changing the center here. You can also change it numerically if you want to, but I think it's great just to be able to drag it around. And that's it. For such a simple shader, it's an incredibly powerful thing. And there are a number of other new shaders that we added as well, but the Vortex Shader is one of the more immediately very cool ones. The other shader I wanted to show, or the other addition, was the Voronoi. Voronoi is a noise type, and I'll just go back to the default scene here. So Voronoi is a noise type that's been added to the Power Fractal. So to access the Voronoi, I just added a Power Fractal. Sorry, I'm hurrying a little bit because we're over time here, and I'd like to definitely still have time for more QA. But anyways, it's just a new noise type. There were always multiple noise types available in the Tweak Noise tab in the Power Fractal. So noise flavor was the drop down for it, and there's just these two additional new options here: Voronoi billows and Voronoi ridges, which are similar to billows and ridges in Perlin, which you might, in terms of one being sort of the pillows and one being sort of the cracks, if either that makes sense. So let me turn off the default fractal terrain, and you'll see just the effect of the Voronoi now on the terrain. So this is Voronoi billows. Perhaps I could just do a render and you could see what that looks like. And then Voronoi ridges gives you a very different character. You can see here in the small preview, you're getting some idea of what it's doing. If I apply a color, maybe it'll help highlight what's going on there. Anyway, just new noise types. They're useful for cracks and for rock formations and stuff like that. It's a very kind of iconic looking noise function that gives very interesting results, and so it's nice to have added to Terragen 3 and be very easy to use. Actually, let me make sure I tilt down and set the camera. So I'll let that render and see if we have any questions about either the Vortex Warp Shader or the new Voronoi noise flavors in Terragen 3.
Okay, folks, any questions or final questions on the topics that we've covered in the session we've had just now?
They have been used to make tornadoes. It's an approximation, but definitely if you were using a localized cloud and had a Vortex Shader on it and had it very tall but very thin, yeah, I mean, you could do something like that. Depending on the detail of the effect you're looking for and the accuracy, it might not be the most ideal way to achieve it. It's definitely, the Vortex Shader in particular is good for hurricanes, though. Large scale hurricanes work very well with this. Actually, I've got some examples to show. I neglected to show those. Let me do that. There are some nice examples of the Vortex Shader being used on clouds there. So there's a nice kind of hurricane look, or a forming tornado. That's pretty cool. It's Richard Fraser created that image, and we've got these images here that were created by another user. These are being used on a large scale to make what looks like a gas giant. These are just large vortexes. You can obviously use multiple instances, multiple vortex shaders in a scene to create, these multiple swirl points and stuff like that. So useful for space scenes and just all kinds of stuff. It's a really fun, cool new addition. And anyway, so, well, our Voronoi has rendered and it looks noisy and Voronoi, but anyways, yeah, so I suggest just experimenting with the Voronoi noise now that it's accessible. It's just another tool in the toolbox, like so many other noise functions. You have settings with it to adjust just like you do with the other noise functions, but it does have certain specific settings that other or rather a more limited set of settings. So like if you're on a Perlin billows, you've got this the smoothing options. It doesn't have that, but it does have some other tweaks you can apply to it, the variation settings and whatnot.
Okay, thank you for that. Now we did have probably about 4 or 5 different questions for off topic, but I think given the time, what I'm going to do is just paste into the chat box the PlanetSide forums URL. So if you could direct your questions to forums, I'm sure you get to help answer
Yeah, and
those.
just to say,
There's a few on like what's the best PC spec to have,
sure, yeah,
that type of thing,
So just to say about the forums, it's a community there, and we have a lot of our users there, but also the staff reads the forums on at least a daily, if not multiple times a day. We answer questions there. So it's one of our primary communication mediums with our users and for providing support. We also provide support through support@planetside.co.uk. But the forums are a great resource because if you ask a question, we answer it publicly, and then other people can read that answer and benefit from it as well. So the search function on the forums is also very useful. If you have a question, you can go there, try the search first, and you might find your answer already. Also want to just call attention once more to the documentation that's being expanded all the time. It's on our wiki at planetside.co.uk/WIKI, and it's also a link here from the front page of the site, Terragen documentation plus wiki here. And I'll take you to the front page of the wiki. There's a lot of stuff in here. The node reference is one of the most useful, but there's lots of other stuff being added. Some people have asked about animation. I didn't get a chance to demo that stuff, but there is an animation guide here in the wiki. And as I said, it's a work in progress, but there is a lot of information here already. So working with keyframes is in here, working with the animation timeline and other tools. There's some videos and other information. So there's a lot of good stuff in our documentation area. We're still expanding it, in particular the node reference and other areas, but there's still already a lot of good info there. And you can also do a search here. So for example, if I was looking for the micro exporter, I just looked for exporter. There's micro exporter. So this goes back to another question that was asked earlier, and there is a 1, 2, 3, 4 step process to do the export here. So again, just examples of stuff that's in our documentation. Really a good thing to take advantage of along with the community resources in the forums. And that's it. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, you feel free to email us or post them on the forums.
Okay, thank you so much, Ocean. And maybe just a final word from you. Is there any special offers or promotions going on at PlanetSide at the moment?
Well, one thing that's cool is we just added the XFrog products to our website, our store, so you can buy XFrog products directly through us. It's the same price as on the XFrog site, but we do guarantee compatibility. We offer multiple formats, so you can obviously buy TGO, which is Terragen's native format, but if you want to buy objects in other formats, we certainly won't stop you, and we have those in our store as well, so you can order it all through us. If you want to do a single transaction buying Terragen and buying XFrog products, they've got some great object models, and the prices right now are really excellent. They have a sale going on at the moment. that is a 50% off sale on the bundles that we're selling, and you get a lot of plants for a pretty darn good price. And so that's kind of step one of our work with XFrog. We're looking at some other options for possibly some bundling or other things to be doing with them. But for now, we've got their bundles their volume bundles in our online store, and you can buy them there through us.
So please do give your thanks to Ocean for his time today. It's been really good to see Terragen 3 in action. And thank you for attending. We'll send out recordings to you next week.
Recording of the conference has stopped.